The theater lights dimmed, the crowd settled, and for a split second there was complete silence, the kind of silence that makes your heart beat louder than your thoughts. Before you even know who is about to walk on stage, before a single word is spoken, you feel it, something unforgettable is about to happen. If moments like these give you goosebumps, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this are the reason we believe in dreams. Backstage, a man stood alone, hands trembling slightly, breathing slow but heavy. His name was Daniel Harper, a 32-year-old from a small seaside town in England where dreams were often spoken about but rarely chased. He wasn't famous, he wasn't rich, and he wasn't even sure he belonged here. What he carried with him wasn't confidence, it was memory. Years of it. Pain, hope, loss, and a promise he had never broken. As the stage manager called his name, Daniel closed his eyes and whispered, "This is for you." Daniel's story didn't begin with applause or bright lights. It began in a cramped living room where music was the only thing that made sense. His mother used to sing while washing dishes, her voice soft but full of soul. His father, a factory worker, would come home exhausted yet still smile when Daniel sang along. Music wasn't a hobby in that house, it was comfort. But life has a cruel way of testing joy. When Daniel was just 17, his father passed away suddenly. Overnight, the house went quiet. His mother stopped singing. Daniel stopped dreaming. He tried to be strong. He left school early, worked odd jobs, and helped his mother survive. Music stayed hidden in his chest, locked away with memories he was afraid to touch. Years passed. His mother grew ill, and during long hospital nights, Daniel would hum softly beside her bed. One night, barely able to speak, she took his hand and said, "Don't let your voice die like mine did." She passed away 2 weeks later. That promise became Daniel's burden and his purpose. Standing on the Britain's Got Talent stage, Daniel felt smaller than ever. The judges sat high above him, Simon Cowell in the center, expression unreadable as always. Simon had seen thousands of auditions. Great singers, terrible singers, emotional stories, dramatic performances. It took a lot to surprise him now. Daniel introduced himself quietly. No dramatic speech. No big story. Just a man with tired eyes and a fragile smile. "What will you be doing for us today?" Simon asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "I'll be singing an original song." Simon raised an eyebrow. "Original songs are risky." Daniel nodded. "I know." The music began softly. Just a piano. Daniel's voice entered gently, almost unsure, as if testing whether the room was safe enough to hear him. The first verse told a simple story of a boy, a home, and a song his mother used to sing. Some people in the audience leaned forward. Something about his voice wasn't perfect, but it was real. Raw. Honest. As the song continued, his voice grew stronger. The lyrics shifted from memory to loss, from silence to struggle. Daniel sang about nights spent alone, about dreams buried under responsibility, about promises made in whispers. The camera cut to Simon, who had stopped writing notes. His eyes were fixed on the stage. Then came the chorus. Daniel closed his eyes and let everything out. The pain he never spoke about. The love he never replaced. The fear that this moment might be his last chance. His voice cracked, not because he couldn't sing, but because he felt too much. And instead of pulling away, the audience leaned in even closer. By the second chorus, people were crying. Not sobbing loudly, but quietly, the way you cry when a song touches something personal. Amanda wiped her eyes. Alicia pressed her lips together, trying to stay composed. Even Simon's posture changed, he leaned back slightly, arms no longer crossed, as if the song had reached a place he kept guarded. The final verse was almost a whisper. Daniel sang directly to his mother, thanking her for believing in him when he didn't. As the last note faded, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with emotion. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the theater erupted. A standing ovation. Cheers. Applause that didn't feel polite, it felt earned. Daniel stood frozen, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by something he had never experienced before, being truly heard. Simon waited for the noise to die down. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "I've been doing this show for a very long time," he said. "And I can tell when something is just good, and when something is unforgettable." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "That wasn't about hitting notes. That was about telling the truth. And you did it brilliantly." For the first time, Simon smiled, not his usual smirk, but a genuine smile. "That audition," he continued, "is one I will never forget. The votes were unanimous. For yes." Daniel broke down, covering his face, shaking as years of doubt finally loosened their grip. Backstage, he collapsed into a chair, sobbing, not out of sadness, but release. But the journey didn't end there. Fame doesn't erase fear overnight. As the competition progressed, Daniel struggled with pressure. Social media comments cut deep. Some praised him. Others questioned his talent. Old insecurities returned. He almost quit before the live shows, convinced he wasn't strong enough for the spotlight. Then he remembered his promise. In the semifinals, Daniel sang again, not to impress, but to honor. His performance wasn't flawless, but it was powerful. He reached the finals, standing once more under the lights that once terrified him. Win or lose, he had already done something remarkable. He chose not to let his voice die. Daniel didn't win the season. But he won something far more lasting. His audition went viral. Millions watched it, shared it, cried with it. People wrote to him saying his song helped them grieve, helped them hope, helped them start again. Simon later said in an interview that Daniel's audition reminded him why he fell in love with music in the first place. Sometimes, one audition isn't about a competition. It's about courage. About standing in front of the world and saying, "This is who I am, and this is my truth." Daniel Harper walked onto that stage as a man full of doubt and walked off as a voice for anyone who ever felt unheard. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own dreams or promises, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere out there, another unforgettable audition is waiting, and maybe your story is next. The lights didn't fade in gently that night, they snapped into silence, as if the theater itself was holding its breath. The crowd quieted, phones lowered, whispers stopped. In that suspended moment, before a single foot touched the stage, something invisible settled over the room. You could feel it in your chest, that strange pressure that comes right before a life changes forever. If you've ever felt a moment like that, one that stays with you long after the screen goes dark, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us why dreams matter. Backstage, standing just beyond the curtain, was a man no one knew. No headlines followed his name. No cheering fans chanted for him. His name was Thomas Reed, and at 35 years old, he carried more doubt than confidence, more memories than hope. His hands were shaking, not from fear of singing, but from fear of being seen. He wasn't afraid of failing, he had failed many times before. He was afraid of succeeding and then losing it all again. Thomas grew up in a forgotten town where the sea met rusted factories and people learned early not to expect too much from life. His childhood home was small, but it was filled with sound. His older sister, Emily, played an old piano with chipped keys, and Thomas would sit beside her, singing whatever came to his mind. Their parents worked long hours, tired but loving, and music became the glue that held the family together. Emily believed in Thomas's voice before anyone else did. "You're not meant to stay here," she would tell him. "Your voice is bigger than this place." But life has a way of interrupting dreams without warning. When Thomas was 19, Emily was killed in a car accident on her way home from work. One moment she was laughing on the phone with him, promising to teach him a new song. The next moment, the world went quiet. The piano was closed. The house felt hollow. Thomas didn't just lose his sister, he lost the person who saw his future more clearly than he ever could. After that, Thomas stopped singing in public. He took a job at a warehouse, working night shifts, keeping his head down. Music became something private, almost painful. He would sing alone, late at night, the way some people cry when no one is listening. Years passed. Friends moved on. Dreams faded. But one thing never left him, the sound of Emily's voice telling him not to give up. One evening, after another exhausting shift, Thomas came home and found an old notebook tucked away in a drawer. Inside were lyrics Emily had written for him, pages filled with unfinished songs and encouragement scribbled in the margins. On the last page, she had written, "If you ever get scared, sing anyway." That night, Thomas made a decision that terrified him more than anything he had ever done. He applied for Britain's Got Talent. Now, standing backstage, that decision felt unreal. His name echoed through the corridor as a stage assistant called him forward. Thomas closed his eyes and whispered his sister's name, not asking for luck, just strength. The curtain opened, and suddenly he was standing under blinding lights, facing thousands of people and 4 judges who had seen it all. Simon Cowell sat in the center, calm and unreadable, arms resting casually, eyes sharp. He wasn't cruel, but he was honest, and that honesty had ended more dreams than Thomas could count. Thomas introduced himself softly. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, not with nerves, but with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Simon asked what he would be performing. An original song, Thomas replied. Simon leaned forward. Why an original song? Thomas hesitated, then answered honestly. Because it's the only way I know how to tell the truth. The music started slow, just a piano, simple and raw. Thomas began to sing quietly, almost like he was afraid of disturbing the room. The first verse painted pictures of childhood, of shared laughter, of promises made between siblings who believed the world was wide open. His voice wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it carried something deeper than technique, it carried memory. As the song moved forward, his voice grew stronger. He sang about loss, about the moment life splits into before and after. He sang about silence, about walking through years feeling invisible. The audience stopped shifting in their seats. The judges stopped writing notes. Something had changed. When Thomas reached the chorus, his voice cracked, not from weakness, but from honesty. He didn't fight it. He leaned into it. Tears rolled down his face as he sang about fear, regret, and the courage it takes to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop. The camera caught Simon, no longer relaxed, his attention fully locked on the stage. By the second chorus, the room felt smaller, more intimate, like everyone was sharing the same memory. People in the audience wiped their eyes, not because they knew Thomas's story, but because they recognized their own in his voice. Loss sounds the same no matter who sings it. The final verse was barely louder than a whisper. Thomas sang directly to his sister, thanking her for believing in him when he couldn't. The last note hung in the air, fragile and exposed, before fading into silence. For a long moment, no one reacted. Then, slowly, the audience stood. The applause didn't explode, it grew, wave by wave, until it filled the theater. Thomas stood frozen, overwhelmed, his hands covering his face as years of buried emotion finally surfaced. Simon waited for quiet. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said. "I didn't expect that." He paused, searching for the right words. That wasn't a performance. That was a confession. And those are very rare. Simon leaned back, nodding slightly. "I've heard thousands of voices on this stage. But what you just did, that's the kind of audition you remember long after the show is over." For yes lit up the screen. Thomas collapsed to his knees, crying openly, not from joy alone, but from release. Backstage, he shook uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the realization that his voice had finally been heard. But the real journey was only beginning. As Thomas advanced through the competition, the pressure increased. Expectations weighed heavily on him. Social media buzzed with opinions, some kind, some cruel. People questioned whether his first audition was a one-time emotional moment or real talent. Old doubts crept back in. There were nights he couldn't sleep, convinced he didn't belong. Before the semifinals, Thomas nearly withdrew. He felt exposed, vulnerable, afraid of disappointing the memory of his sister. Then he remembered her words. "Sing anyway." In the semifinals, he chose another original song, one about healing, about learning to live with loss instead of running from it. His voice was steadier, stronger. He didn't reach the highest notes perfectly, but he reached something more important: connection. The judges praised his growth, his courage, his honesty. Thomas made it to the final. Standing on that stage again, he wasn't the same man who walked in weeks earlier. He still carried pain, but he also carried purpose. He sang not to win, but to honor the journey that brought him there. He didn't win the competition. But he won something far greater. His audition spread across the world. Millions watched it. People wrote to him, sharing stories of siblings lost, dreams abandoned, promises kept alive through music. Simon Cowell later said in an interview that Thomas's audition reminded him that talent shows aren't just about winning, they're about moments that change people. Thomas returned home, not to the warehouse, but to a small studio where he began recording music. On the wall hung a framed page from Emily's notebook. He sang every day, not because the world demanded it, but because he finally believed he deserved to be heard. Some auditions impress. Some entertain. But once in a while, one reaches deeper than applause, deeper than fame. It reminds us that courage doesn't always roar, sometimes it trembles, steps forward anyway, and sings. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a dream you've been holding back, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere, someone is standing backstage right now, terrified and hopeful, about to sing the truth, and those are the moments we'll never forget.